Welcome back to Case Closed Anime Review, episode 112. This we're reviewing the 1001st episode of the anime, The Moonlight Sonata, Part 2. Yep, this one finishes up adapting chapter 64, well, the last page, and from 65 to 67. Yep, finishing this arc. And here's something interesting, though, when it comes to how the scheduling works for next week. Now, there is no new episode next week. Nope. It's a repeat. From what I could tell, it's a remastering of The Scarlet Return. Interesting. Yeah, this is the one that revealed that Aki was Sichi. He was the guy living in the Kudra house. Yeah, it's interesting though they went to that one for remastering, but my guess they probably want to. So, even though it kind of is a remaster next week, who knows if we're going to have one in 2 weeks. Because the fact it's a 5-parter, it might not come back for about a month. I will keep checking. Okay, this episode picks where last week's episode left off with one of the murders happening, the second murder happening with the mayor, with the current mayor of the city. And of course they have fewer things happen, like we have a suicide happen this episode. Well, apparently a suicide. One guy hangs up, and nope, he did commit suicide. This happens like a little bit later, while they were trying to look for something. I'll get to that. So, they do, in fact, make some mild changes here, and they make some additions to this one. Basically, take, for instance, this scene. We have, well, they basically cut out from the action manga itself. Now, in the manga, for the scene where you have Kono look at the sheet music, you have Mori hitting him. Now, in the episode, he slaps him in the head, which apparently knocks him over, on top of the blood thing music. And in the manga, he basically just bops him like he usually does. Also, they didn't make a sort of a cut here, at least they cut him out here. There was actually a CSI there. Yeah, they actually got this character for this moment, where it just basically just Maguire, Mori, and Conan basically relieved that he smooshed the thing over. And then pretty much afterwards, they did make some other small cuts here and there. Well, unless you watched the original episode, you're probably like, wait, why the heck did they cut that for? So, they basically, they have none of the guys get murdered. I'd say pretty much everybody who was mentioned by the officer, the guys who all died. Of course, at that point, the employee guy had not been killed off yet. Now, they did, in fact, add something here that actually was not technically in the manga. They gave Conan a lot more dialogue in this episode than he did in the original one, where he mentioned about the sheet music, talking about a grudge, and the sheet music did not really play a big role in the original story, both in the original adaptation of the story and in the actual manga itself. In the anime, they focus a lot more attention on that. Also, if you watch this episode compared to, let's say, the previous episode before this one, you notice something missing from this episode. A cell phone. Yes, a cell phone. And they also brought up the fact we also cassette tapes here. Well, the original case came out back in the 90s, so yeah, they had to include that because it'd be quite strange to say, oh yeah, we use a CD. Or use a phone to take a picture of this thing instead of somebody he knows. And of course, Conan does the classic style of detective work by having a notebook and writing the sheet music down, which is quite interesting, the fact he did that. Yes. And then later they had the other two things happen. Now, they also have the fiance of the previous mayor who just was murdered. He was actually the second person who got killed. Where Conan basically hears something while he's getting the key to unlock the room with the sheet music. Now, they do have a little moment here, basically, you have to get sheet music, which the key for where the safe is actually at the substation, which Conan goes with him. They actually made a small change here in the actual, if you read the chapter itself. It looks like he's just standing there for a whole hour. In the episode, he just basically slouched out in the officer's desk chair. Yep. So, he does find it after like an hour. Then he hears some. Then he basically goes to unlock the door. He hears a sound in the piano room, and he knows somebody lying on the floor. And of course, someone jumps to the window, and he nearly trips over him. Luckily enough, he's the kid. Probably doesn't hurt him very much because he's a kid, but he did notice about the broken window. So they later on have the guy who was injured. Like there was a thing in his pocket. It's actually a tuning. It's a tuner meant to tune a piano. Yes, and it's later revealed the reason why he had it was because the guy was a big fan of the actual guy who donated it, so he wanted to keep the thing in tune. He occasionally came by to tune it. And of course, when Conan discovered that there was a secret door underneath, and discovered there was these little dots on the floor. What is this stuff? Well, it was revealed this is actually drugs. Yes, drugs. Okay, yeah, freaking drugs. So, yep, so Conan basically how he figures out, though, of course, everybody gathered at the village office for this, which you're probably thinking, okay, that does make some sense to do, then basically keep constantly in the community center. I guess the office seems like a more reasonable place. Also, who the heck is who's actually the ruling person of this island? Because, well, two of the mayor, let's see, one of the mayor candidates is dead, the current mayor is dead, so they also assumed that it was the other candidate. Of course, he's basically accused of the murder, despite the fact there's no evidence of it. And of course, you have Conan running upstairs and figure out exactly what was going on. Basically, he discovered via the crime scene photos that there was a red button. Went upstairs, figure out, oh yeah, it's the auto reverse function. Now, I'm not all that familiar when it comes to old electronics, when it comes to cassette tapes. My dad might be, but not me. I'm more basically the current stuff. So, it's to do auto reverse, and of course, they have it where all the murders basically coincide with playing of the actual music, with the exception of the last one. So, basically, now off screen, Conan had basically knocked out Mori. In the manga, you actually see it, and I believe in the original episode they did show this, but in the episode, like, oh, Mori's already knocked out. When in the world, like, I'm not really sure why they cut this for, like, him knocking out, because they generally show it every episode, him knocking him out. And you see him making a hilarious pose where he sits down like he's on the floor or on a bed. Yep. But in this episode, nope, not shown. He's already unconscious, and Conan's sitting on a chair between his legs. So he basically explains that the previous mayor's secretary, the one who just murdered, it turns out he was actually into drugs, and it turns out there are people who died, along with the late famous pianist, were all into drugs. Yeah, this is all a drug, basically a big drug operation, and even though the guy had nothing to do with the murders at all, he may have been the one who knocked out the actual guy. But he didn't kill the other people. Oh no, he had nothing to do with it. Like, he's like, whew. And he's like, okay, then who actually murdered him? It was the smoking hot doctor, who's actually a guy. Yeah, they figured out it's actually a guy. I'm like, yeah, even both in the original manga, I kind of remember from the original episode, I originally watched it 2 years ago. Like, how in the world can this be a guy? It's clearly a woman. Yes, why in the world they say this is a guy for? They also bring up in a flashback that the doctor actually met the previous mayor, which actually this was an additional scene here. I think they added this in here. Now, the guy did die of a heart attack. Of course, oh yeah, the previous mayor before the current one was murdered. And then it was revealed, oh yeah, he didn't die. He was a murderer. He died of a heart attack. All because he found out the doctor was actually the son of the guy who he assisted in the murder of. Well, basically kind of turned into a murder-suicide. Why I say murder-suicide? Because it basically, if you watch this, that way they describe it, it's very similar to what happened to the late Chris Benoit and what he did to his family. Of course, this was 14 years ago. Though people may not actually know exactly what happened, people tend to theorize what happened, and they've kind of concluded exactly what happened. It's because of all the frequent chair shots took in the head and all concussions basically he went through that caused him to murder his, I believe this is his second wife and his second son, and then later on kill himself over the course of a weekend. Of course, it was 14 years ago. Though in the case of this episode, they kind of say, oh yeah, it was all happening in one night instead of the course of a few days like it was in real life. It's just that when people think of murder-suicide, the Benoit murders are the first one people tend to think of a lot of the time. So, it turns out he was murdered. How he was murdered and why in the world he was crazily playing the piano, honestly, I have no idea because the episode never explained it. It's hinted at that the 4 people who died killed him. They don't bother to give an explanation neither in the manga. I don't remember if in the original adaptation episode they gave the explanation for this. Not even this adaptation explained how the heck they murdered this guy and his wife and daughter. Oh, in case you're curious though, how the son managed to survive the actual fire. Apparently he was sent to the mainland because he was ill. I'm like, really? They clearly have a clinic on this island currently. Did they not have a clinic 12 years prior? Who knows? And then they have a scene very similar to happen in the manga where Conan confronts a doctor, who is an actual guy, and basically you'll see the sheet music, because sheet music play a lot more bigger role in this one than in the original story. Where he confesses she lived a long life, and he's like, okay, that would make sense if I knew about it before I committed the murders. And of course, he decided to burn down the community center with him in it. And then said Conan's life, because Conan basically is a good person, just throws him out the window. Looking up, it's a one-story window. Of course, Conan tries to go in, hears the music, and what was he playing? Thank you, little detective. Yeah, they mentioned the whole thing about the black notes, which I appreciate, though, in this version, that the sheet music plays a lot bigger role in this one than it did in the original story. And if you ever watched the original adaptation of this, in the Japanese cut of this episode, it was an hour-long special. The English dub, for some reason, I don't think this is Funimation's fault for doing this. I think whoever aired this over here in the US on TV decided to split this hour-long episode into a two-parter. Also making Season 1 longer, because the original Season 1 was 26 episodes in Japan. Here it's 29. Because they basically took hour-long episodes and they cut them in half. If they probably saw some episodes, if you, like, the thing with Case Closed was, if you watch, like, even some of the episodes in the sub, a lot of these episodes' runtimes are basically like watching a TV special. Like, I remember watching one that was like 2.5 hours. Yes, a 2.5 hour, like, episode. That was the thing with Case Closed. If you watch any of the old previous episodes that weren't dubbed, like, that's basically come across. Episodes are longer than normal 24-minute runtime. These episodes usually are like an hour, 2 hours, or in some cases, 2.5 hours. Surprisingly, there was never a 3-hour episode. Yeah. But in the case of this one, this is still pretty good. I like what they did with this two-parter. Basically, it's shown a lot of it is basically similar to the original story. But unlike in the original story, the sheet music did not play a big role. And of course, it got some dialogue and some minor bits here and there. But it's a good, very good, faithful adaptation. Now, as in the case of when they're going to do another Case Closed episode, that's adaptation of an actual case per se. I'm hoping eventually to do the Mountain Snow case, because that one is going to be quite interesting, because it is roughly a 4-parter. Yeah, it's a 4-parter. I'm not really sure why this one has not seen the adaptation yet. Maybe they're waiting for the current arc to start in the manga before they actually start, adapting that one, because there probably isn't enough material to do like a 2 straight cases in a row. They probably have, as far as I can tell, they haven't done that since like season, like, I'd say like 24, I think it was. Yeah, they've been doing a lot more original content the last several years. But this is the first time they've actually done a complete, like, readaptation of an old case. Now, what do they do with other cases? Well, they did it one at a time once before this, just to fix an error they made the first time. But in the case of anything more than this, I don't really know. I would probably suggest if they're waiting for manga chapters basically to come out, why not adapt the spin-off series, the specials? Adapt that. You have the series has adapted this in the past. They adapted like one of the chapters from one of the spin-offs, one of the spin-off one-shots, which by the way is over 500 chapters. This is a damn thing. They could do that for a series of episodes. Do that. But who knows when they're actually going to do that. Okay? So yeah, that's it for this particular review. Stay tuned for my Comic Corner, which is coming next. And then after that, it will be Quintus Quintuplets, Yoshima Half-Day Apprentice, and finally, Fire Force. Okay? See you next video. Bye.